The negotiation chamber of Thalion 3 pulsed with gentle violet light, the dome ceiling dimmed to accommodate the presence of humans whose vision, unlike that of the Thalions, wasn't tuned to high ultraviolet. Ambient mist crept along the smooth black floor, dispersing in thin eddies with every step of the diplomats and guards. Sergeant Nolan Reyes stood behind the human envoy, spine straight, one hand resting casually on his belt near the stun pistol holster. He didn't need it. This was a peace summit, but protocol was protocol. He blinked slowly, sweat beading beneath the collar of his uniform. The atmosphere in the chamber was heavy 99% humidity to prevent the Talian's dermal layers from drying out, but Reyes felt like he was swimming through a furnace. The air clung to his skin, oppressive and sweet-smelling. His pulse was a little fast, but manageable. Probably dehydration, he figured. He shifted his weight and tried not to sway. Ambassador Lorne was mid-sentence, discussing trade routes through the Orless Rift, when Reyes's vision shimmered, blurred at the edges. The words in the room turned watery. Heat surged behind his eyes, nausea twisting low in his gut. Then his legs buckled. The sound of his body hitting the polished floor silenced the room like a switch had flipped. Reyes lay on his side, eyes open but unfocused, lips parting in a dry mumble. Sweat poured off him, soaking into his uniform like someone had broken a pipe inside his body. Dr. Velrin, the Talian medical officer seated near the front, leapt forward with the unsettling grace of her kind. She was tall and translucent. Her pale green skin shot through with radiant blue veins that glowed faintly under stress. A neural crest along the back of her skull trembled, shifting colors in sharp pulses of yellow and white, alarm. She scanned him with a narrow, handheld device, its pale cone of light washing over his chest, then froze. "Your blood is boiling," she said with horror. Reyes muttered, barely audible. "It's just a fever, give it a day or two." But Velrin had already pressed the emergency icon on her console. Red bands of energy sealed the chamber's perimeter. A biocontainment field slammed down with a metallic hiss, encasing Reyes in a transparent isolation pod that lowered swiftly from the ceiling and locked into the floor. Ambassador Lorne stepped forward. "Dr. Velrin, he's likely just ill. Humans get fevers." "You do not understand," she snapped. "A core temperature of 103.6 degrees is beyond survivable. His internal systems are melting. He must be kept from destabilizing further. No one is to enter the chamber. Quarantine is in effect." Behind her, several Thalian aides were already evacuating through the emergency sterilization corridor. A hissing mist of decontamination gas enveloped their thin bodies. One of them stumbled, gagging. Inside the pod, Reyes blinked slowly. "I don't need a sarcophagus," he slurred. "I need Tylenol." Velrin's crest flared red. "What is Tylenol?" Ambassador Lorne's jaw tightened. "A human antipyretic. Lowers fever." "Madness," Velrin whispered. "Why would you interfere with your metabolic warning systems?" She activated the internal dispersal mist, flooding the chamber with a fine spray of ionized coolant. The temperature around Reyes dropped rapidly. His skin prickled, convulsed, then turned a pale gray. For a moment, Velrin thought she'd saved him. But then, inexplicably, his vitals stabilized. And stayed stabilized. That night, the outpost medical wing was sealed off entirely. Velrin reviewed the scans in silence. Reyes's white blood cell count was spiking tens of thousands of individual immune agents surging into his bloodstream, migrating through his lymphatic system, engulfing viral cells wholesale. His lymph nodes were inflamed. His spleen was visibly swollen. He was waging a war inside his body. And somehow he was winning. Velrin stared at the readout. "He should be dead," she said to herself. "His tissues are flooded with inflammatory markers. His body is attempting to heat itself beyond viral thresholds. That is not defense. That is internal destruction." Still, the fever persisted, and so did Reyes. By morning, his temperature had dropped by 1 degree. His lips were cracked. His muscles twitched involuntarily, but his heart held rhythm, and his oxygenation remained strong. She initiated another cooling cycle, unsure if she was helping or hindering. Reyes opened one eye. "You put me in a freezer," he rasped. "You were dying," Velrin replied. "Your blood was at the brink of vaporization." He let out a hoarse laugh. I've had worse flu back in Pennsylvania. That was freshman year. Woke up thinking I was a toaster oven. Velrin tilted her head. You were not a cooking appliance. Exactly. Fever dreams. Common. She looked at him for a long time. And you survived such internal chaos before? He nodded slightly. Lots of fluids. Rest. Not freezer gas. Just need some time. She withdrew, troubled. Back in her office, Velrin opened a locked research file, labeled Biological Disparities, Endothermic Species. The section on humans was sparse. Adaptive immune response, it said. Highly individualized, incomplete data. She added a new entry. Preliminary observation. Humans permit pathogen entry and initiate thermal escalation as immune strategy. She hesitated, then tagged the report. Potential internalized warfare mechanism? Later that day, she returned with a colleague, Dr. Thurn, a xenobiologist, along with Dr. Ures, a Thalian cell specialist. All three stood in silence, as Reyes's vitals displayed on the wall. You say his leukocytes engulf the intruder organisms? Dr. Ures asked. Yes, Velrin confirmed. And they replicate faster in his marrow to outpace the virus. Thurn leaned closer. So his body allows a breach and then responds with cellular violence? That's the opposite of our dermal defense model. Velrin exhaled, crest dull and twitching. It is trench warfare. Inside the pod, Reyes sipped water through a straw and muttered, Told you. Just a fever. By day 3, Sergeant Reyes couldn't stand on his own. The fever had broken sometime during the second sleep cycle, but it left behind a hollow fatigue that clung to his bones like damp wool. Every movement was deliberate. Turning his head too fast triggered waves of nausea. Sitting up made the ceiling ripple and swirl. His skin had stopped sweating but felt too dry now, and his throat burned with every swallow. Velrin observed him from behind the reinforced bioshield, recording vitals as her neural crest glowed. A soft amber. Curious. Cautious. I told you, Reyes rasped. Just a virus. Happens all the time. My niece once got this bug in kindergarten, had a higher fever than I did. She was 5. Had juice and cartoons. 2 days later, she was fine. Velrin blinked slowly. The child's systems survived an internal infection at that temperature? Yeah. Her mom kept her hydrated. Little monster bounced off the walls by Thursday. She glanced at the screen again. Reyes' spleen inflammation was down. Leukocyte count had peaked and begun its descent. A massive protein expression surge had passed, replaced by elevated interleukin-10 levels markers of immune regulation, not destruction. It was cleanup now. Wound control. Her notes were stacking with contradictions. Your immune system, she said, it does not resist infection through prevention. It allows the invasion. Not allows. Can't always stop it. We try with skin, mucus, sneezing hell. We even have vaccines, but if something gets in, well, we've got an entire SWAT team inside. She turned toward the glass. You burn yourselves. You raise your core temperature enough to compromise viral integrity. You inflame tissue to slow fluid transport. Your cells explode themselves in targeted apoptosis. You maim your own body to survive. That's not the plan, Reyes muttered, leaning back. It's just what works. Dr. Thurn, reviewing molecular readouts beside her, interjected. How did your species evolve to tolerate this level of internal violence? Our systems surrender. When breached, we isolate, amputate, or cull. Survival rates are low. We don't fight infections internally. Maybe that's why we're still around, Reyes said, voice hoarse but steady. Earth's not kind. Never has been. He looked toward the ceiling. You ever seen a snowstorm? Freezing wind, ice everywhere. Bacteria and viruses still live in it. We had to learn to survive the same way we learned to make fire badly and stubbornly. Velrin didn't reply. Instead, she deactivated the coolant mist. She hadn't told Reyes yet, but his body temperature had started recovering faster, without the ionized dispersals. She needed to know if her methods were the problem. By midday, Reyes was propped up in the medical bed, a slow drip hydration line hooked into his arm. His eyes were clearer now, the capillaries less inflamed, and though his voice cracked, he was speaking in full sentences. "Can I get some Tylenol yet?" he asked. "My head feels like a jackhammer with rhythm issues." Velrin hesitated. "We do not store terrestrial medications, but we synthesized its molecular blueprint based on database records. A sample is on the way." Dr. Ures approached the side console. "We've been running concurrent virus cultures. The pathogen doesn't replicate well in Talian temperature ranges. But your sweat," he glanced at the medical log, "still carried viable particles. One of our orderlies collapsed after brief exposure." Reyes sat upright too fast and winced, gripping the bedding. "You let someone in here without proper PPE?" "He approached to clean the external interface," Velrin said. "He was in proximity less than a minute, no direct contact. Still, he collapsed within the hour." Reyes's expression darkened. "Was it airborne? Contact?" "Contact," Velrin confirmed. "We believe the virus transferred through condensed perspiration left on the console." "Then that's on you," Reyes muttered. "This was never a biohazard to us. You assumed your containment would work on my biology." Velrin stiffened. Her crest flickered in a shamed gray. Later that evening, Reyes reviewed his own vitals, courtesy of a patched interface Velrin provided at his insistence. As he navigated the logs, something caught his eye. Elevated viral proteins after each missed dispersal. Not a lot, just enough. He scrolled back. Same pattern every cycle. "Velrin," he called out. She appeared moments later, folding her hands in the observation alcove. "You've been spraying me with antiviral mist," he said. "To weaken the virus?" "Yes. It is formulated to suspend protein transmission and coat viral surfaces in inert binders." Reyes looked up. "Those binders, they'd prevent a virus from unfolding, right?" "Correct. They arrest metabolic cycling, delay replication." He pointed at the screen. "You delayed my recovery." Velrin's crest flushed pale white. "We believed it was assisting you. You gave the virus a shield. My immune system was trying to burn it out. You wrapped it in asbestos." Silence hung for a moment. Reyes pressed his palms into his eyes. "I should have been up yesterday." "I did not consider," Velrin said carefully, "that your system required the fever. We assumed any such temperature was pathological." "Well, it is," he said, "but it's also part of the cure." Hours later, the antiviral mist cycles were stopped entirely. Reyes was given fluids, nutritional supplements, and finally a crude acetaminophen analog. Within 2 more cycles, his temperature normalized. The virus was still present, but localized, contained. The war was nearly over. Dr. Velrin sat beside his bed, datapad in hand, her posture rigid with reflection. "There was a time," she said softly, "when I dismissed the warnings of my mentor. He once said that medicine between species is not about knowledge, it is about listening. I thought he meant protocol. Procedure." Reyes didn't reply. He was too tired to offer comfort. "You were lucid," she continued, "and still I acted like your symptoms could not be trusted, because they were foreign, because they did not look like ours." Reyes opened his eyes. "Doc, I don't need an apology. I need you to believe us when we say what works for us." She nodded slowly. "We will begin a rewrite of all human infectious protocols. No more default mist dispersals. Fever thresholds must be reevaluated. You will not be frozen again." He gave her a weak smile. "Thanks, really. But next time I'm sick, I'm staying on the ship." Velrin stood, datapad glowing with notes and voice memos. Before she turned to leave, she paused. "There is something uniquely violent about your body's resilience, Sergeant Reyes. Not brutal, not mindless, but intentional, measured. Your systems do not flee from disease, they hunt it." He coughed once, painfully. "We don't do it on purpose. We just didn't get the luxury of being fragile." On day 5, Sergeant Reyes finally stood. His legs shook. His breath came shallow and slow. But with one arm braced on the bedside console and a stubborn grimace planted across his face, he pushed himself upright and stayed there. Velrin watched silently, hands clasped behind her back. The pod had been opened 12 hours earlier, the last of the isolation seals lifted under her direct authorization. Reyes' vitals were stable. The virus had been reduced to harmless fragments, now circulating through his lymph system and slowly degrading. But she'd seen enough to know it wasn't Thalian medicine that had saved him. It had been the fever, not that it came without cost. Reyes's skin still bore the rashy pink flush of sustained high temperature. His nails were pale. His pulse had steadied but remained high, hovering just above normal range. The fatigue clung to him like static. He walked only when necessary, and with exaggerated care. Basic coordination had returned, but stamina would take longer, much longer. "How far can you walk unaided?" Velrine asked. Reyes grunted. "Around the bed, if I pretend I'm not dizzy. You are not cleared for strenuous activity." "No plans to run laps," he said, lowering himself into the bedside chair with a wince. "Just needed to feel human again." Dr. Ures stepped into the room, carrying a sealed sample container. "We've cultured the virus from your sweat, saliva, and bronchial discharge. In Thalian tissue, it causes catastrophic protein collapse in under 15 minutes. Reyes frowned. "So it wasn't just a bad reaction. It's fatal to you." "Immediately," Velrine confirmed. "One of our junior medics developed dermal lesions after brushing against your bedding. He will recover, but with permanent tissue scarring. Your body is no longer a hazard to itself, Sergeant, but to us, it is a minefield." Reyes lowered his gaze. "That why no one comes closer than 10 feet unless wrapped in plastic?" "Yes," Velrine said without hesitation. A long silence settled between them. Then Reyes leaned back and said, "You need better landing protocols. No offense, but someone should have caught this in the atmospheric scans. My immune system nearly turned your whole outpost into a petri dish." Velrine nodded. "Environmental screening will become standard. No organism will land on Thalian surfaces again without pre-boarding pathogen assessment and controlled decompression intervals. And no more antiviral mist? Only under explicit species match protocols," she said. Reyes exhaled slowly. "Good." Hours passed quietly. Nurses, human and Thalian alike, moved through the corridors outside the medical wing, avoiding direct entry unless summoned. Reyes slept for most of the afternoon, waking occasionally to sip mineralized fluids or grimace at the dull ache crawling through his joints. By evening, Velrine returned with a translucent data slate. She handed it to him wordlessly. He blinked at the title, Endothermic Immunoaggression, Human Internalized Pathogen Warfare. "Your paper?" he asked. "My re-education," Velrine replied. He skimmed the abstract. Her summary described the human body as a thermally volatile defense matrix and noted that human leukocytes performed targeted enzymatic disruption to neutralize foreign entities at great systemic cost. She even detailed the protein structures of human interleukins, the fever response as an evolved biochemical tactic, and the concept of symptom severity not equating to mortality. "You describe my immune system like it's a siege weapon." "In many ways, it is," she said. "We protect the exterior. You destroy from within. You do not retreat. You escalate. You heat. You rupture infected cells. You extract energy from the chaos." He read the final sentence aloud. "The fever is not failure. It is the drumbeat of war." Velrine inclined her head. "It was what I saw." Reyes chuckled once. "Dramatic, but accurate." He tapped the screen. "I'm impressed. You even got the recovery time about right." Velrine nodded. 10 days for stabilization, 6 more for full tissue repair. Human muscle degradation occurs rapidly during febrile states. Electrolyte loss, mitochondrial fatigue. You'll be weak for another 2 weeks at least. He didn't argue. "Has anyone else seen this yet?" he asked, lifting the slate. "Not yet. It will be presented to the Interspecies Medical Council tomorrow." Reyes studied her for a moment. "You're not afraid they'll question your methods?" "I welcome it," she said. "I've spent years believing the safest body was a sealed one. But you showed me that the body doesn't need to be sealed to survive. It just needs to know how to fight." A silence followed. This one wasn't awkward. It was filled with something else: mutual understanding, carved out through sweat, blood, and the steady rhythm of a recovering heart. Then Reyes added, "Did you include the part where you nearly cooked the virus into my bones?" I phrased it cautiously. "Diplomatic," he said with a smirk. Before Velrine could reply, The door hissed open. Ambassador Lorne stepped in, wrapped in a filtered cloak and a portable breathing hood. "Sergeant," he said, voice echoing slightly, "you look like hell." Reyes gave a faint shrug. "Feel better than I did." Lorne turned to Velrin. "I reviewed your preliminary report. I had no idea our physiology could be so lethal." "Nor did we," she said. "But the danger was not his presence. It was our lack of understanding." Lorne's tone softened. "I've submitted a request to have Sergeant Reyes medically exempted from future postings on Thalian systems. No offense, Sergeant." "None taken," Reyes said. "Believe me, I've seen enough violet lighting and humid walls for one lifetime." Velrin stepped back. "I will leave you to speak. I must prepare final annotations." As she turned to go, Reyes said, "Doc." She paused. He tapped the slate. "Thanks for not giving up." She nodded once. "Thank you for surviving." As the door closed behind her, Reyes leaned back against the pillow. Lorne looked down at him. "You understand what you did here, right? We've been negotiating trade. You just opened a conversation about survival." Reyes nodded slowly, still pale, still coughing once in a while, but alive. "Told them," he muttered. "It was just a fever." By day 10, the human escort shuttle had returned to orbit, and Sergeant Reyes had regained enough strength to pack his own duffel bag, though it took longer than he wanted to admit. Every movement reminded him of the deep fatigue that lingered in his limbs, the soreness that clung to joints like old bruises, the way his balance still felt a half-second behind his intentions. But he was walking unaided, breathing clearly, eating solid food without nausea. And miracle of miracles, he'd finally had a full night's sleep, without waking up drenched in sweat or shivering against phantom chills. The medical wing was quieter now. Most of the Tolian personnel had returned to standard operations, though the walls still hummed with ongoing sterilization cycles. Reyes noticed subtle changes in protocol. Nurses no longer hovered at the door. Equipment stations had been retrofitted with cross-species hygiene modules. And most tellingly, the antiviral mist no longer hissed in routine intervals through the hall vents. Velrin approached as he zipped his bag shut. "You're leaving on schedule," she said, not quite a question. Reyes nodded. "Command cleared my transport this morning. I'll be in quarantine on the ship for another 3 days, just in case, but after that, I'm heading back to Earth. I've got some leave stored up." Velrin's neural crest dimmed to a soft, contemplative green. "Will you recover fully? Physically? Yeah. Give it another couple of weeks, and I'll be jogging again. Might even start drinking coffee without my hands shaking. And otherwise?" Reyes gave a tired smile. "Let's just say I'll be reading the planetary humidity levels before stepping off the ramp next time." She handed him a small, flat container, slightly translucent, sealed with a flexible biolock. "This is a clean, hard copy of the report," she said. "Formatted in your script. I added a translated foreword. I thought you might want it in your possession." Reyes turned it over in his hands. "You put the whole thing in here?" "Everything we observed. The mist, the fever, the immune escalation. I included your insights on the acetaminophen analogs and the systemic inflammation responses. It will be archived in the Central Interspecies Medical Council database under Cross-Biological Conflict Management." He raised an eyebrow. "Catchy title." She hesitated. "I included a footnote." Reyes opened the file and scrolled to the end. The last page bore a short line. "Do not mistake the fever for failure. In humans, it is the drumbeat of war." Beneath it, in a smaller font, "Dedicated to the body that declared war and lived." He blinked once. His throat tightened unexpectedly. Velrin didn't speak further. She stepped back and waited. After a long pause, Reyes closed the container and tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat. "Thanks," he said quietly. She gave a single, solemn nod. "You taught me that resilience is not always quiet. Sometimes it is violence turned inward for survival. I will not forget that. I'm just glad I made it out without losing a lung." "You nearly lost much more." "Yeah." He rubbed his temple. "Still feel like I did 10 rounds in a furnace." She offered him a cooling patch, one of the few treatments that had provided genuine comfort over the past few days. Reyes took it gratefully, pressed it to the back of his neck, and exhaled. Moments later, An automated tone chimed. The shuttle had arrived at the platform. His departure window had opened. He slung the bag over one shoulder and turned toward the exit. But then, almost as an afterthought, he looked back. Velrin? Yes? When you first scanned me, you looked terrified, like you'd seen someone detonate. I believed you were dying. And now? She tilted her head. Now I understand you were not failing. You were fighting, and we mistook that war for collapse. He nodded once and left. The platform hummed with light wind and faint electrical pulses as the transport shuttle docked. 2 other human personnel in full sealed gear awaited him with decon kits and rehydration pouches. Reyes stepped inside without ceremony, took his seat, and stared out the viewport. Talion 3's violet sky shimmered above the outpost domes. Strange, distant lightning flickered between thin atmospheric layers. A beautiful planet, not built for humans. He didn't regret coming, but he wouldn't be back. As the shuttle rose, Reyes pressed his hand over the inner pocket